Hi all, it's Tuesday. I am pre-recording my content this week, so if any facts change, I apologize in advance. There's nothing I can do about it. It's either no content or pre-recorded content, and I don't want to have no content. So we're having a Shut Up Wesley day today. I am going to talk about the Wil Wheaton stuff. I am sure this will cause some blowback, some extreme disagreements, but that's, what we're here for. So if you want more content like this, that is sort of a culture, gaming culture, nerd culture stuff, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. I do not, tailor my content to views. I tailor content to things that interest me and things I think are worth talking about. We had that discussion about drama videos and whether or not to chase clicks that way. The general consensus was don't chase it, but don't avoid it either. That's what I'm doing here, because the whole Wil Wheaton being driven off social media, which is the way it's being framed, thing was interesting to me because of my personal journey with it. When I originally heard about it, I believe the first place I heard about it was either somebody DM'd me the information or I saw it on Brad Glasgow's Twitter feed. And I know I asked Brad what happened, and people linked me to the, relevant details. And my personal opinion on the whole thing went from, he probably didn't do anything that bad, but lived by the sword, died by the sword, to, no, he was actually in the wrong here. I don't know if I'd go so far to say he deserved what he got, but he was actually wrong in what he did here. And I don't think people were overreacting. I think that he made mistakes. He is not owning the mistake, and he is not making the mistake right. That's never right, no matter what the issue is. At the end of the day, I believe a person's humanity is based on two prominent things. Three. Empathy, self-awareness, and free will. And Wil Wheaton isn't showing any of these. The nice thing about this is I don't have to infer what he thinks. He put it on his blog, and you're forgiven if you believe that a 14-year-old hacked it. But the world is a terrible place right now, and that's largely because it is what we make it. That's the name of the blog that he wrote about this whole situation. Let's summarize, because this is the core, I believe, of Wil Wheaton's misery. He has been on two extremely successful television shows. He's been very lucky in life. Star Trek: The Next Generation, and I know that was a giveth, taketh away kind of thing. There was a lot of bad feels directed at him because people didn't like the Wesley character. I was of a certain age. I really liked Wesley. I was a fan of who I thought Wil Wheaton was before he kept doing things on the internet that made it impossible to be his fan. But he seems extremely incapable of seeing and appreciating his blessings and knowing what's good in your life allows you empathy. If you can't see the good as well as the bad in your own life, you have a very hard time empathizing in a positive way with other people. You're more likely to be one of these people that's too bad, you deserved it, until it happens to you, and then it's like, the world is a terrible place. The world is not a terrible place for Wil Wheaton. I'm sure he still gets Next Generation royalty checks. And then he was on The Big Bang Theory as a recurring character, basically playing himself. Gee, I want to live in a world that terrible. It's that whole Oliver and Company line. If this is torture, chain me to the wall. What? The world is a terrible place. The world is not a terrible place for Wil Wheaton. He is fortunate enough that he is his money comes from mainstream media, which means there are publicists and agents, and he can leave social media and it won't cost him a thing. Meanwhile, he's doing things that are actually damaging the financial well-being of other people, and he won't apologize for that. That's basically what I won't even call it a dog pile because I have no evidence that it actually was. Definition of terms, a brigade is when somebody goes on Reddit or 4chan and frames the whole thing and says, they're doing this, get him. And it's this sort of organized, get him, get him, get him, get him, get him. And there's an element of that on the social media service called Mastodon. They were reporting his account, and the moderators finally went, I don't want to have to deal with this noise. We're suspending your account, which at least it's an actual person making these decisions. But Mastodon just sounds like something I'm not at all interested in, because it sounds like a combination of the noise that is generated by Twitter and guild drama that like you get in MMOs. Like one of the things that I was like, no thanks with World of Warcraft was the guild drama. You know, when there are ever any decisions to make, when people didn't like the way they divvied up loot after a raid, there was drama. And I'm like, no, I have to deal with this, you know, day to day. I don't want to take on more bad. But hey, he wanted to give it a try. He knew how it worked. Even he said that's their right to decide that they don't want to deal with that. But I can believe that this was something that people sincerely have a problem with, what he did, that it wasn't just guild drama. It wasn't just tribal politics. What he did was actually wrong. And so I'm going to attempt to make the case that what he did was actually wrong. What he did, first of all, he started blocking anybody who made a Star Trek joke, and there happened to be a few people who were transgender who he blocked for making not just a Star Trek comments, but a Baffa D's nuts thing, which, how do you get mad at that? Like, man, if you're going to be on social media, you have to have a sense of humor, especially when it comes to memes. I mean, people hit me with the I hate the Sims. People hit me with the no pants thing. Gingers have no souls. Things like that. When I'm cranky, it's like, oh, this again. But I'm not going to react. Why? Because memes mean you matter. You know, when people take an element of you and they can interact with it, because don't forget, a meme is just a little tiny piece of culture, interchangeable piece of culture. If you are meme worthy, that may be tiring sometimes, but it's actually a good thing. It means you're relevant. It means you've stuck in someone's consciousness. And getting mad at that, and I know I used to be crankier about it a few years back. I know, but I've learned. This is the point. I've learned. I got better. I've evolved. Wil Wheaton, who has far more career success than I have, hasn't evolved. He hasn't learned. He's not taking the internet on his own terms and developed a sense of humor about himself. Now, he will blame mental health conditions for that. I am not persuaded. I think that people can be sympathetic to struggles with mental health, but an individual's mental health challenges are their responsibility. People stop becoming more understanding if you aren't doing everything you can to get that under control. And if social media exacerbates your depression or your anxiety or whatever, you have to use social media in a way that's healthier for you, or you have to get off social media. That social media, unless you're like me and have a web-driven business, it's a nice to have, but it's not essential, especially with WhatsApp and everything that are essentially private. You know, you can stay in touch with people without Twitter. You don't have to check Facebook. You know, these things are optional. And so I don't buy the I'm mentally ill excuse. This blog post he posted is just wallowing in self-pity and shows no real awareness that he did cause harm. Now, whoa, high burden of proof for caused harm, right? You guys know I believe that. I'm prepared to present that evidence because he used a block list that I am on, advertised as the worst harassers on the internet, but it is badly coded. It's only based on who you follow. So not what you've done, who you chose to read. And I think everyone can think of a few people they follow on Twitter, not because you agree with them, but because you find the disagreements interesting. I follow a lot of conservative voices on Twitter that I find, Tom Nichols is one that I don't agree with his conclusions of a lot of things, but I see how he got there. And it's like, all right, I can see your point. I have another opinion on it, but this is not crazy land. There is a method here, and I like that. But this block list was just, if you followed a certain number of people, and it was kind of opaque who those people were, you got put on the block list too. So it was not, as advertised, something preventing you from having to deal with the worst harassers on the internet. It was just a clique mechanic, clique script that just, oh, you follow that person? Ew, ew, ew. High school stuff, right? Junior high school stuff, mean girl stuff. Now, it turns out that Randy Harper is a trans exclusionary, some people say reactionary feminist. I say radical feminist. She's a TERF. She is a transphobe. She doesn't believe trans women are women. Obviously, I disagree profoundly with this. And so do a lot of people, especially trans women on the internet. But Randy Harper's block list started becoming more and more. Apparently there were 2 block lists and there was some confusion which was which, but one was allegedly curated. I disagree. The block list was not curated. It was automated. If you ended up on the list, you had to file a, oh, take me off, please. You had to bow to Randy Harper personally. And it was up to her whether she took you off the list or not. There was no rules. It was, you have to unfollow these people. And even then, some people, she was just like, no to some people. So despite what you've read on the internet, it was not curated. It was automated. And then retroactively, okay, she could take some people off, but you got put on automatically. And I wasn't going to bow to anybody in that regard. I, first and foremost, insist on preserving my right to free will on the internet. Nobody tells me who to follow. Nobody. That is bullying behavior. That is cliquey. I'm sorry. I left high school. I don't want to go back. Screw that. But then there was this other list that it was apparently her own personal shit list of just people she didn't like. And a lot of trans people ended up on that list. Well, Wil Wheaton promoted that list. Wil Wheaton promoted something that was openly transphobic. And there are consequences to that. I took my lumps for refusing to completely abandon the bad side of Gamergate, the pro Gamergate side. I didn't promote the things I didn't agree with, and I didn't promote anything they were doing. I just was like, no, I don't think it's all about harassment. I think that's actually a minority based on what I've seen that has overtaken anything. Nobody else can have a debate here because people are muddying the waters and causing trouble. That was enough to get me excommunicated from the vast majority of the gaming cliques. I think that's wrong. I think that if this industry is not mature enough to handle that opinion, then we have a lot of work to do. I think that this, in Wil Wheaton's case, is more cut and dried. Because if he didn't know that list was transphobic, he didn't do his research. It is not hard to find out Randy Harper's political views. They're all over the internet. And you can't claim to be an ally of trans people. I hate the term allyship. I hate it. An ally is someone you have in a video game, not when it comes to social issues. You have your views, you believe them or you don't. But if he claims to support transgender people, actions speak louder than words. He's saying I support trans people, but then he's doing things that in some cases actually hurt the livelihoods of transgender people who ended up getting put on Randy Harper's shit list, their primary method of promotion for their businesses, for their Patreons, for their art, whatever, was Twitter. And they lost money as a result. And that's why I say he caused harm. That's the line for me. Preponderance of evidence, he caused harm to people's financial bottom line. And I think it's extra bad that he's done it because for all his pissing and moaning, he hasn't really had to worry about money ever. He was on a TV show when he was like 12 or 14 or something like that. He has never had to worry about money. So he is inducing a hardship in people who already have enough problems. You are inducing hardship through no fault of these people own. They just crossed Randy Harper. They got on the wrong person's shit list. And they exist. They're transgender people who exist, and Randy Harper doesn't like that. That matters. That matters. And I think that when you do that, when you are that sloppy, when you are that lazy, you don't have the right to complain that people don't want you around. You don't just have views. You actively promoted something that hurt people's financial well-being. And like I said off the top, I was prepared to think he was the victim here, okay? And now I profoundly disagree. Ironically, he didn't check his own privilege. He didn't realize that as somebody with a verified account, with a high follower account, you gotta look into something before you weigh in, like I did on this issue. It took me, I found out about this Friday afternoon, and it took me like the whole weekend and a bit to figure out exactly what was going on with this. I'd rather be late than wrong. And that's because I was a subscriber in, my less wise days to, you got to get it out because that's the best clicks and, oh my God, traffic and all that stuff. And I made some mistakes that I ended up feeling bad about. And so I don't do that anymore. I'd rather take a sort of internet Hippocratic oath and first do no harm. So I'm going to get my facts in order, in part because Gamergate did happen, and in part because I know that, you guys who watch and support my content do rely on me to get it right more than you rely on me to get it fast. And that may not be true. I understand other people, the whole if it bleeds, it leads, and you got to be the first one out. I get that that's the reality for a lot of these websites. I'm fortunate enough to make some money. I'd like it to be more, obviously, but I would rather make a little bit of money and have to live more humbly than earn a living knee-jerking for clicks and harming another person. I cannot understand why someone like Wil Wheaton, who doesn't have to worry about money, would be as reactionary as he is. I think he needs to grow up. Maybe he was traumatized by the Wesley Crusher stuff and never really matured beyond a 14, 15-year-old mentality, but the world is not a terrible place for Wil Wheaton. Let's put it this way. The world is a better place, a less terrible place for Wil Wheaton than it is for the trans people whose businesses he harmed through his actions. And he does need to make that right. And whining about blog posts and getting positive press from comic book websites and left-leaning, nerd publications doesn't help that person's financial situation in the slightest. However, it is better for people's personal brands nowadays to play the victim and not admit anything wrong, because we live in the age of Trump, where if you're wrong or you change your mind, you're a fence sitter, or they can't trust you, or our priorities are all backwards. Our priorities are all backwards. There are incentives to inaccountability. It's not just that there are no incentives for being accountable. You actually catch shit for being accountable in this day and age, for admitting that you were wrong and doing things differently. You know, you even take shit if you bother to listen to the other side. I take shit for listening to the other side. Am I gonna change my ways? No, because I believe it's right. I believe that wisdom, being able to have convictions, doesn't involve hiding from a dissenting opinion. If you truly believe you're right, you're able to hear a dissenting opinion and not change your mind. And it is possible to hear a dissenting opinion. This has happened to me a lot. You hear a dissenting opinion, you can understand that point of view. You can add that into your understanding of the issue, and so you create nuance. So, you know, your primary idea is still correct, but you add to it and go, okay, I feel more strongly about this amended opinion than the original one, you know? Or it's like, all right, you're right. That's a completely valid point. That doesn't change how I feel about this issue. If you can't go through that process, then you never build your sense of self. You never build your self-confidence. You never build your critical thinking ability. You don't self-actualize. And more, I see people benefiting from just crying victim instead of learning from the experience. If you're why me all the time, you're not learning. You know, why me? Well, sometimes life's not fair, and sometimes you're screwed up, and sometimes it's a combination of the two. And this led me to wonder whether the punishment fit the crime with Wil Wheaton. I don't believe in abusing reporting tools. I don't. Now, I'm not sure whether the people who reported him believed they were abusing the reporting tools, because they may have thought that, well, he has transphobic views, therefore I think we can report him. And it seems like on the Mastodon service, it is very much whatever the moderators want to do on a given like cluster. I forget what they call them, but they're servers. So they're fiefdoms, just like Reddit. So, you know, there really are no hard and fast rules there. If the moderators decided he wasn't worth the trouble, well, that's the quirk of that service. But I don't like the idea that people basically reported him for thought crimes as opposed to what he did on that service. Now, I could be wrong there. He could have actually said something actively offensive. I just haven't seen that. But, you know, if I were running a Mastodon server, God, no, I won't. I'm trying to find Discord moderators, for God's sakes, because I know I can't do it. But you know, if I were that moderator, the owner of the server on Mastodon, I would have been, get that, you know, we judge people for their behavior, not their opinions. Like, get that away from me. Come on, grow up. Talk to him instead of just reporting him. But the moderator didn't want the noise. Those are the rules of that social media service, and Wil Wheaton, according to his own blog, knew that going in. He knew how it worked. So why he thought he'd get a warm welcome when he's caused financial harm to people based on you know, an immutable characteristic, sorry, man. Sorry, people have the right to take issue. That's how free speech works. And I think Wil Wheaton really needs to step back now that Big Bang Theory is ending. You know, it's going to be in reruns forever. So he's going to get those residuals forever. He needs to get his shit together for his own well-being and the well-being of his family. Because the thing that drives me crazy about guys like that is that they're actually quite coddled, and their inability to own their shit and their inability to grow up and to deal with their mental health issues affects everyone around them. Their families, their loved ones, their friends. This shit sprays everywhere. And some mental health conditions are notoriously difficult to treat. Depression is not one of them. There are lots of treatments for depression. It isn't like, you know, schizophrenia or some sort of schizoid disorder or something like that. It's a very common mental health issue. And there are millions of people out there with depression and anxiety who don't behave like miserable cusses in public like this. That's an excuse. That's an excuse. And I say this as someone who believes very strongly in being inclusive of people with mental and physical disabilities. However, there is a dignity of risk principle involved here. There are consequences to things you do. You are a grown-up. You do not stop being a grown-up just because you have depression. This is a treatable, overcomable condition. It just seems like he'd rather wallow. And I know that people are going to take that the wrong way and think I'm increasing stigma and everything like that. No. I know a lot of people with depression. I have talked to people who do policy and outreach for people with mental health conditions. Dignity of risk is an established independent living principle. It is perfectly valid to say, I will support you in your quest to overcome this illness or to get it manageable. I will not support your desire to use it as an excuse. And I think in this case, that's what Wil Wheaton's doing, because you can think it, you can feel it. You don't have to write it down. You don't have to put it on the internet. Learn some impulse control, man. We all do it. We all do it. So I'm sure some people are going to be mad at me for this. It's a day ending in Y, but that's my unvarnished opinion. And I really do believe strongly that we need to bring accountability back into these discussions. If you hurt people, own it and make it right. It's that simple. Okay. Thanks for watching. Did I plug the Patreon? I don't remember. Here, Patreon. There. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com. Leanna K. Appreciate it. Thanks for watching.